Okay. Hi guys, hope wherever you are, whatever you've been doing, you've had a sensational day. Traveling with food allergies can be challenging to anticipate the many and varied situations you may encounter while away. Obviously, more so when you're overseas in a non-English speaking country. Flying with food allergies in particular is often the subject of much media attention, a lot of allergy families would know. Along with that, the subject adds to confusion and a lot of anxiety for allergy families. But it's better to have good memories, obviously, with your holiday for your trip than regrets. So planning is the key to be able to sort of alleviate some of that anxiety. So tonight we're going to be sharing some top tips for flying with food allergies, more so than anything, just to ensure your child's safety. And we've got our beautiful guest here, Caroline from Aussie Allergy Mum. How you doing?
I'm really good, thanks, Rach. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure as always. Love you to bits. So for anyone that maybe hasn't met Caroline before, she's a busy mum who combines her background in paramedics and her study in nutrition to help other allergy families to find accurate and helpful allergy information and resources, as well as a whole heap of support. So we've just recently published an article of yours titled Flying with Food Allergies. So maybe a family who hasn't read the article yet, can you give us a brief overview on what the inspiration is behind that, and we can get stuck into our 3 key questions?
Yeah, so we're basically in the process at the moment of planning our first family holiday where we're going to fly. And today is my allergy baby's 6th birthday. So this is great timing for our lives. So we are going through the process, of planning to fly and heading overseas. So I was going through everything and organising everything and having my own anxiety about the situation. And I thought, you know what, there's plenty of other allergy families that must be thinking the same thing. So that is the, the thought behind the article.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. And you're finding, and I guess with a lot of your clients and that sort of stuff as well, depending on where you're traveling overseas. I mean, you can travel obviously domestically, but if you're traveling overseas to a non-English speaking country, that can sort of add to the anxiety levels.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's like the anxiety of just being away from home. Yeah. And then there's the flying added into that. And then if you're adding in overseas medical care that you're not that aware of, possibly other languages, that just compounds, into a lot of things that could possibly go wrong. So, yeah.
Well, there's heaps to cover off. So let's get stuck into the 3 key questions. So question number 1, can you tell us what your tips are for flying safely?
Yeah, so the first tip is to contact the airline ahead of time. And when you do this, it means even before you book, because some airlines are very allergy friendly and others are not so much. And so you really need to do your own research about that. And my suggestion would be that you do it before you actually book your tickets, because you may end up deciding that the cheapest airfare for that day is not actually the easiest for you based on the allergy accommodations and food changes and all that kind of thing that the airline might be able to offer you. So get in early, check out the airline before you book, and talk to them about the restrictions that you've got and the concerns that you've got, and see what plans they have in place for dealing with that. Yeah. Most airlines are pretty aware of the situation and pretty bloody good at taking care of people. So, yeah, get in there and give them the opportunity to help you out, I guess, right from the beginning of the process.
What sort of questions would you suggest families ask, do you reckon?
So I would definitely be mentioning the particular allergens that you're avoiding. If you're avoiding nuts and peanuts, then I would be talking directly to them about whether they serve them on the flight. It's going to be individual, obviously, to each situation as to how touch and contact allergic your child is and whether they suffer, from airborne allergies. So it really needs to be tailored to, what you are dealing with, but just general questions around what plans they have in place and what they can offer to ensure safety, are definitely worth asking right from the get-go.
Yeah. Fantastic.
The next tip, I guess, is to visit your doctor and the pharmacy before you fly. So to fly with your medications, particularly with EpiPens, it is best to always travel with a letter from your doctor as well as the prescriptions and the pens. Obviously, you know, there's very strict rules around flying with anything that could be perceived as a weapon. And unfortunately, EpiPens do fall into that category. There is no issue with flying with them, but having a letter from the doctor along with the prescriptions can really help just to ease the runway security. So that's definitely worth it. And having a letter just in case you do end up in hospital or needing to see a doctor overseas, it just makes it so much easier if another medical doctor has written you a letter that explains everything, because you're going to be stressed out and you might forget something. So if you can have all that written out and then head off to the pharmacy and just make sure that you've got lots of everything you might possibly need. You know, a little bit of extra medication and all that kind of stuff will definitely come in handy.
What about the MedicAlert bracelets? Is that something that your doctor will... Are they helpful, do you find?
Yeah, I really think they are helpful. They're particularly helpful in situations where if we're talking about a child with allergies where you might not necessarily be with them. So, and they might not be in a position to be able to tell somebody, either because they're too scared to or because they're too unwell to. So definitely if you are traveling with your child and potentially going to be away from your child, then I would definitely be thinking about a bracelet of some sort just to alert emergency personnel to the fact that there might be more of an issue going on or something that they need to consider. That's definitely something that is always worth having with you.
Yep, and stuff like travel insurance as well. Have you found in your experience that is having a letter from a doctor is something that helps with travel insurance at all, or what are your thoughts on that?
So travel insurance is an interesting one. Up until a few years ago, it was extremely difficult to get travel insurance for somebody who had suffered a reaction recently. And I was actually in a position a few years ago where I wasn't able to travel overseas for a period of time because I myself had several allergic reactions in a 12-month period and nobody would cover me.
Wow.
That is no longer the case. Most insurers will cover you, but often there is a higher price on the premium. But most insurers will cover you, and it's very important that you declare that pre-existing medical condition when you take out that cover and pay that extra premium so that there's absolutely no room for error when it comes to actually needing that care. Yep.
Well, that's definitely a really great tip. All right. Well, should we get on to question number 2? Was there anything else you got for question number 1?
The only other one is just to make contact with staff at check-in and when you board the plane, each step of the way, just let them know what's going on and remind them, because sometimes the message doesn't get all the way down the chain. So just make contact with them.
And sorry, I'm not sure, I can't remember if you mentioned it before, like with letting the airline know about the food allergies and that sort of stuff. With the meals, you generally let the airline know before as well if they've got
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll always try and do their best to cater. And if they can't cater, they will let you know.
All right. Let's get into question number 2, which is, can you please give us some tips for an emergency situation? What to do? What do we do? What's your tips?
So just some quick tips for if an emergency does happen whilst you're in the air. Firstly, as soon as you think that there might be a problem, you need to make contact with staff on the plane. There is always, all the staff on the plane are always first aid trained. All flight attendants are first aid trained. So you definitely want to make contact with them. But they are also aware of the other emergency plans for the plane. It's important for the pilot to know immediately that there's potentially going to be a problem that would create a situation where the plane might need to land at an alternate destination.
Wow.
And also the other thing is there is generally always at least one medical doctor on board a flight. So it's really good if you can make contact with that medical professional early on. And they'll be able
to identify them as one of the staff members, you're saying?
The staff will be able to identify them. So they actually tell the airline that when they're flying. So they will be able to tell you who that person is and put you in contact with that person, and then they'll be able to help you also. So just first point of call always is just to contact the staff. They have very strict protocols about who they tell and how they tell them and how they organise everything once an emergency happens on board the aircraft. So
yeah. And as a parent as well, I mean, a lot of parents naturally would have conducted and completed their own first aid as well. What do you suggest in that situation, that in a worst case scenario, if you're first aid trained, but there's medical professionals around and that sort of stuff as well, how do you know how much to help and how much to be able to allow the medical professionals understand that that's what they're there to do, and they're obviously that would be quite hard, I think, for a parent to be able to.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess the best thing is to always have with you a copy of your allergy action plan.
Yeah.
Because if you have that plan, the medical professional will follow that plan, and you will also have been trained to follow that plan. So everybody will hopefully be working together through that plan.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should get on to question number 3.
Yeah.
Number 3 is, what are your tips for overcoming the fear of media reports of disaster, which you mentioned that offline before. There's been quite a few recently in the media. So, how do you overcome fear?
Yeah, so this is something that comes up in the media quite often, and we talk, there's been a couple of cases of people who have had severe allergic reactions on board aircraft and all of those kinds of things. Some of them have been in situations where they've been reassured that things would be safe and they haven't been. And so I guess it comes down to overcoming the fear of being out and about with our allergy children, no matter where we are, but knowing that we're in a confined space at 30,000 feet above the land makes it that little bit harder. So I guess what we can do is be as absolutely prepared as possible. So make sure we have our action plans, make sure we have our emergency medications, make sure that staff know who we are and what we're dealing with. Make sure that food is organised and taken care of beforehand, and don't take any risks, that you wouldn't be normally happy to take. It might be easiest to just fly with your own food that you know is safe, and that way you don't have that opportunity for something to sneak in or someone to make a mistake. But all those same things that you do normally every day to keep your child safe, they still work even when you're flying. So sometimes we just have to have a little bit of faith in ourselves and our emergency plans and all of those things, because in the end, we can't be stuck at home chained to our, to our lounge forever. No. So reach out if you need support with those kinds of things, and we can absolutely, be helping you out with making sure that you've covered all your bases before you go.
And you're sort of saying to bring along food staples as a backup. Nobody wants an empty tummy in transit.
Yeah.
So what sort of ideas would you sort of suggest is sort of helpful?
Yeah, so the easiest thing for bringing on board the airline is going to be packaged food. And that's definitely easier if you're travelling overseas and you're passing through immigration and quarantine in other countries. Packaged food will generally pass through perfectly fine. It's the fresh fruit and vegetables and that kind of thing that's an issue. So I don't know, most allergy parents out there like me have always got a couple of snacks in their bag that are safe just in case. So probably just use that same idea that we're doing on a daily basis, and just have a few things with you on the aircraft, because hungry kids are really whingy.
Yeah. And look, in particular, I think, when traveling to sort of to Asian countries, or non-English speaking countries, but Asian countries in particular, there's a lot of peanuts in their diet. I've had some family members sort of travel with translation cards as well, and they've actually had the things translated. So when they actually sort of go over there, it's all translated for the waiter and the server.
Yeah, and they are like some great ideas. And I think maybe after doing this flying with allergies, as we get ready to go overseas, I'll do another article on all the little things that we're going to take with us to make the time overseas easier for sure. Yeah. And that's all those kinds of things, definitely.
And another thing I was just reading online before, they were saying, yeah, with accommodation, sometimes it's easy to choose like a self-catering accommodation option, which gives you the ability, depending where you're going. I know you don't want to go on holiday to necessarily cook, but in this instance where it's vitally important, there's always an option, and it saves money. And
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
yeah. Up until now, I think every holiday that we've done as a family has been self-catering. So this will be the first one that won't be. And so that's a big thing. Sorry?
Well, whereabouts are you heading?
We're going to go to Fiji.
Awesome.
Yeah, and there's a couple of really allergy-friendly resorts in Fiji. So we're going to head to one of them and just have a few days over there. Just not a long holiday, but just a few days and see how we go. Cross our fingers.
Well, the last question I have as well, would you suggest that when you land for families, just to know how far the local hospital actually is and what they would need to do in that instance of an emergency?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think we're always pretty good at knowing where our emergency options are around us. But I would definitely think about that. And some people feel safer staying close, in accommodation that's closer to that kind of medical care.
Yep.
And it's always worth, knowing where the local medical centres are and just having a bit of an idea of the type of medical care that you're walking into, because a lot of countries don't have the sophisticated medical care that we have here. So it's well worth looking into all of those things and talking to your doctor about all of that, and just being prepared ahead of time for the things that you can think of that might possibly go wrong, which sounds terribly morbid, but better to be prepared than to be caught out and be a long way from home.
Yeah, my nephew's got nut allergies, and my brother and sister-in-law were on holiday recently in Asia, and the holiday packed a beautiful picnic for them, and they did all the right stuff, and the hotel and everyone knew about the allergies. And unfortunately, they packed some biscuits, and within the biscuits there was some nut tracers, and unfortunately they did have to use the EpiPen, which was just not the ideal situation and quite terrifying on holiday. They did all the right stuff. They let the hotel know, and they, even when they were packing, everything else was fine. It was just there was traces within the biscuits. Unfortunately, my nephew just had to have a small bite of the biscuit. So these things do happen, and no matter how much you are diligent with your communication, it's always just a matter of having, as you said, everything else, your checklist ticked off, and you've got your EpiPen with you at all times and all of that stuff. But more and more, I think globally, hotels are becoming more aware. And I think, and you would know yourself, of course, that the percentages of children with allergies here in Australia is quite high compared to other countries, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and I think it's so horrible when situations happen like that, because I think it makes us more worried about going overseas. But I always try to remind people that I could make a packaging mistake at Coles tomorrow.
True.
Do you know what I mean? And so we can literally, cross our T's and dot our I's every time, but every now and then an accident happens. Yep. And it truly is an accident. And whilst it might be harder when we are traveling, and particularly if we're overseas, we still have to, I think, just try to still do some of those things. Yeah. Because, you just don't want to be in a situation where your whole life is on hold, because it could be on hold forever. Yep. If they don't have those allergies. So, yeah, absolutely.
100%. And the whole idea that you booked a holiday is to have a great time. So, but it's just you've got to be switched on the whole time. We'll have a fabulous time in Fiji. Can't wait to hear how it went. Is your first big holiday overseas? And
thanks. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and if mum and dads and family and grandparents have got any questions for you, how can they contact you? Whereabouts will they find you?
Yeah, so you can head to www.aussieallergymum.com, or you can find us on Facebook at Caroline Partridge Aussie Allergy Mum. We do have a free support group and lots of other things happening, so come over and join the conversation with us and help us spread the word and empower our allergy kids.
You're an absolute superstar and love you to bits. Have a fabulous holiday, and give your little one a big hug and kiss from Auntie Rach for the 6th birthday party celebrations tonight. and speak to you really soon. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.